Hey folks, BlackCross here, and welcome to another video. And yeah, quality has been bumped up quite a bit actually, in all honesty. I just wanted to have an excuse not only to showcase this camera, but also to kind of talk a little bit about a subject that is right now relevant this month. For those that don't know, literally less than 20 days, or in this case 15, depending on when you're seeing this, we are literally within the release window of Final Fantasy XVI, and that's pretty insane. But you might be asking the question, why haven't I been talking about it as much as I had with 15? There's actually only one legitimate reason, and that's only because of how long 15 had been in development, in terms of the public eye, of course, mind you. So naturally, with that long length of time, of course there is that leverage of hype that was behind it. And since then, not only has 15 have been my biggest hype game, but also two games like Final Fantasy VII Remake, as well as Kingdom Hearts 3, Biomutant, and they've been kind of mixed, you know, in terms of like hype scaling, if you mind. Kingdom Hearts 3 and Final Fantasy VII Remake, to me personally, matched up in terms of that hype scale. But that's only because I've had to scale back my expectations due to the feedback from Final Fantasy 15, you know? I was kind of looking back at it and I was like, okay, 15 is still a good game, but the hype definitely killed it for me, sadly. So I figured, dial back the hype and maybe I can still enjoy the game as it should be. And thank goodness it did match up to the hype level that I was expecting, since I've dialed it back. Unfortunately for Biomutant, that hype went a little bit escalated, and therefore my hype level was a little bit too high. The game, still good, but didn't meet quite the expectation that I thought was going to happen. With that said though, this is Final Fantasy XVI, and well, I decided to take Final Fantasy XVI a different approach. This time basically barely looking up anything, and instead just waiting for it to get released. And that worked for a good long while until last year. Last year was literally the first official year where we actually started getting major production trailers and details, interviews, and stuff like that in regards to Final Fantasy XVI. And a lot of information has come up, but then there was a lot of information that was coming up before then too. So one of the information that we had was the fact that Yoshi P was the producer of Final Fantasy XVI. And if you don't know who he is the guy who is also in charge of Final Fantasy XIV. Him and his team helped develop it, create it, and help continue the longevity of 14. So you know, based on that feedback alone, Final Fantasy XVI is going to be in good hands with that team. The same thing can be said with the director and writer for 16. He was also part of the project of Final Fantasy XIV as well. So there's a little bit of scale right there, but it goes a little bit higher than that because of his combat director. Now remember, this is going to be an action RPG rather than the turn-based RPG that has been traditionally known. And for a while it's been kind of slowly exiting out of that tradition of turn-based, and Final Fantasy XV was arguably the true action-oriented. Not a lot of people recognize it as such, but it did actually become the very first action-oriented RPG. This one, however, though, is going to take it full-on action. So, in other words, from where we're normally used to some kind of an RPG specs, this is going to be looking at it more action-oriented. And that's because based on its combat director. Now, who's this combat director? Well, the combat director that they picked out was actually the guy who was the combat director for Devil May Cry 5. And if you know Devil May Cry 5, you'll also know that it won Best Action Game award. Yes, Best Action Game. So yeah, the award-winning Best Action Game Devil May Cry 5 combat director, is in charge of the combat director in Final Fantasy XVI. So that also boosted up a little bit higher than it needs to. Then we also have the fact that people on Twitter and social media has definitely bumped it up a little bit more than they should have, with kind of like these random information, these random tidbits and stuff like that. And it definitely doesn't help that we recently had a trailer last year showcasing a little bit more about the combat. But not just the combat, but also to the summon combats. I forgot what they're technically called. It's like Ikin or something like that. But yeah, it showed that. And that was the one thing I was trying not to look into, because my expectations level was that, oh, this is kind of like .hack GU in a way, where it's the epitaph battles and stuff. And judging by what little I have seen so far, it seems a little bit more in depth. So in other words, we're talking like a lot more deeper than .hack GU made, which is a good thing. But also too, I was wanting to be as surprised as possible, so I was trying not to see too much. But arguably, I think I'm probably seeing enough to know what's going to be brought out, but I don't know all the details. Like, I don't know the base combat, I don't know how or what his different abilities are going to be like, I don't know how the story's going to be played out. I just know some shit's going down, and it's going to be a far more mature theme than what we're expecting for a Final Fantasy game. For example, apparently the team was tasked to watch the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones in order to have inspirational ideals for Final Fantasy XVI. So there's that. I'm not a big Game of Thrones fan myself, but in terms of what Final Fantasy XVI is looking, it's looking a little bit like The Witcher 3, which I'm game for that. I love The Witcher 3. I don't care much for the Netflix series adaptation, but I love the game. So if Final Fantasy 16 can make like what The Witcher 3 was, then that's already a start right there. So we're already seeing more and more of an estimate as to like what we could potentially be seeing. And it's kind of insane to know that the quality of Final Fantasy 16 is already hyped up just from what we know so far. This is just glance, okay? This is me just glancing, okay? I haven't really read anything, nor have I looked into anything, and that's because I'm trying to hold myself back on the hype so that I can enjoy it naturally, you know? It's better to enjoy the game from, like, zero expectations, knowing nothing about it, except just diving into it just for the sake of it being just the game. And I feel like that's the best way to go about it these days. These days, we are getting way too hyped, way too easily for games. Games are being revealed too early, arguably. And unfortunately, we are having to wait potentially years for a potential next game. I would rather the team wait at least a year before their scheduled release date, and then do another trailer to say, oh hey, next month the game gets released. And try not to show like a final trailer where it's like, oh, here's some scene from the final epic battle type thing. Square has been doing that a lot recently, if you guys haven't noticed. And it kind of gets old after a while, because it's like, you want to be spoiled free as best as possible, which at this point in time, anything could be potentially a spoiler, so it's kind of hard not to be spoiled by everything. But it's one of those things where it's like, I want to be as surprised as I can be for 16, you know? I'm still as excited for 16 as anybody else is, but I wanted to keep myself from being overly hyped, you know, if that makes sense. So, anyway guys, I just wanted to give my full-on details and thoughts on, like, why I haven't really talked about 16, as well as to, like, show that I'm equally as hyped as everybody else is, and then just to randomly showcase the new camera quality that I've got. So, yeah, just that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. This is BlackCross signing off. Catch you guys later.